Maybe he does, because I saw like people's stories and I checked those. I went to like the funny questions and I went to set up like I don't know. I think he has a more comment.
At the end of the, well, I'm going to stop a little bit early because I have a bunch of, this is not all for you, but part of it is for you. So you've already probably seen your grades online, but because people hadn't taken things, I didn't want to give back quizzes and stuff too early, so I've been anyway, today you're going to get it back. But I'll wait until we have a few minutes left at the end. Okay. So we got through the criteria for going to war, the damage inflicted by whoever the aggressor is, must be, the words that the theory uses, lasting, grave, and certain. All other means of putting an end to the aggression have been shown to be ineffective or impractical. There has to be, the right intention. It can't just be they have gold there, so we want to take over that country so we can mine the gold or the diamonds or whatever else they've got. It can't be for that kind of monetary gain or more land, a larger country, whatever. That can't be it. And the last one I said was there's got to be a serious prospect for success. So that would be wrong for a country to lead their soldiers to war, where they're going to just be, undoubtedly slaughtered by the country that they attack. And it's not going to solve anything either, so for the country that does that. All right, so there's two more on this side of it. The use of military force cannot produce a greater evil than what the country inflicted upon you. So just with the power of our modern means, especially in a first world country, a superpower, we have the ability to blow the whole world up, actually. I mean, we have the bombs to do it. Actually, we have the ones to do it several times over. So we can really inflict some harm if we really, wanted to. I hope we don't want to do that, but so and then everything downscaled from there as well we could do. And depending on what was done to us, what kind of measured response should there be in return? And there should be measure and some discretion taken that we don't produce a greater evil or commit a greater evil than the other country did to us. So all of that power that may rest in the person's hands who makes the decision, whoever that leader is, they would need to use prudence and discretion, because they do have, let's say, of a first world country, probably the means to inflict some permanent harm to another country, and that would be considered against this theory. The last one is that a war has to be declared by a legitimate authority. That seems pretty basic, but countries have protocols for how they go to war, and different countries do different things. In some cases, and when I say war, that could be a formally used term, where the president goes to Congress and asks for a declaration of war. That hasn't happened in an awful long time. Presidents have tended to go and use their authority on their own to carry out certain things, instead of going to the Congress for a declaration of war. Although that's happened in our history, that's our way of doing it. But a war can't be declared by the state of Oklahoma. A governor can't declare war on another country, or maybe really on anybody. The president of a corporation can't declare war on another country. yeah, this has to be, there's a certain route this has to be done by a legitimate authority. We have had situations, though, although it dates back to the early 20th century, where there were a number of companies, and one of them was actually the Dole Pineapple Company, along with several other U.S. corporations that ran operations in Central and South America, Mexico, and they actually privately funded a war in Central America in order to put down some resistance they had. They were, Marxists, and they did that because it was affecting their bottom line. It was affecting their ability to have fruit and sell fruit, whatever fruit they sold, and they did that. That's actually illegal. That a private corporation can't, take on a country and their internal struggles on their own. They can protect themselves and all that, but they can't actually wage an offensive war. And that seems right, doesn't it? I mean, you'd have ExxonMobil waging a war out here, and you'd have who knows, whatever country, Microsoft waging a war, and Google having a war with Microsoft, and I don't know what. So, yeah, it could happen. The thing is that in first world countries, and let's just stick with the United States, there are corporations that could quite easily fund a small war in a small country somewhere and could win. I mean, some of these corporations are so flush with cash that they could easily do this, and that wouldn't obviously be considered a legitimate authority declaring war because it doesn't follow the protocols that we have set forth in statutes and in the Constitution of how a war should be declared or how a military action should be carried out. But we've seen it happen before. It happened again. Central America gets a lot of our, I don't know, but it's happened again in the 80s with with Marxists and Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras, and we were worried about them, moving northward through Mexico and knocking on the border of Texas. And I'm not really sure the domino theory thing ever quite played out, actually, in world history. That might be an interesting topic to look into. That, like, with one country tumbled and the one next door tumbled and the one next door like that, but I don't know. But the Congress kept, like, funding the Contras, as we call them, the opposing group who were Marxists, and then they would take the funding away. And then a year later or so, they'd refund them, and they would take the funding away. And then the Reagan administration got, upset with how wishy-washy the Congress was, and no doubt that they can be wishy-washy, but they got upset about it. So they went out and they sought private donors to give money to keep it going, to fund the war or this ongoing action in Central America. And one of the big donors, by the way, private donors to this war, was the Coors family, Coors Brewing Corporation. I'm sure none of you have heard of them before. What? Beer? Hops? Barley? What? Water? Yes. Coors, very conservative, politically conservative family, and they had been big donors to the president's campaign. And those are the people they turned to for aid. And so the war was being run secretly literally out of the basement office of the White House from the National Security, what's it called? National Security Council? Yeah, NSC. And that's where they were running it from. And not only that, but they did a step further, and they went outside the authority of Congress to hold the purse strings of money, and they sold arms to our good friends, the Iranians, right? And in exchange for taking the profits from those sales, because Iran was involved with the war with Iraq at the time. We were publicly siding with Iraq while we were selling weapons to the Iranians. We really didn't care who won. And we took the profits from those sales and gave that money to the Contras in Central America. Yeah, it sounds like good capitalism, but you're not allowed to run things that way. You're not allowed to secretly sell arms, and you're not allowed. The Congress holds the purse strings of the money. That's how it works. And so that was illegal. That went on. People went to jail for it. People higher up spent time in prison for this because it was certainly a violation of federal law. But that would be an illegitimate authority to have, although it involves the right people, but they're doing it the wrong way. Okay, so that's an important one. That it's the formal way, the protocol that country has for declaring war, and that's the way that it should be done. Okay, let's talk about the conducting of just war. So now we've decided we meet all that criteria. Then once the wars began, there are directions on how combatants should act, how they should conduct themselves. And the word that gets thrown around a lot in this part of the theory is that the people who are involved in the war should use the principle of discrimination, and that's not the way we normally use it, but I'll explain this here in a minute. So the acts of war should be directed towards the inflictors of the wrong, and as much as possible, not towards the general civilian population. So, as they didn't, create the problem. The actual people, the military, the government, those should be the targets of military action, not neighborhoods, not schools, not churches, not whatever, not to do that. And that's what they mean by discrimination, that there should be some discrimination in who we decide is going to be a target. And this is much easier to do today, of course, with modern weapons. We have weapons now that can drop down the air shaft of a building and make it explode on the third floor on the way down. They can, and there's a guy's desk right there. That's the guy they want to kill, and they can get, I don't know if it's that accurate, but they can really pinpoint an attack now. And so things can be, thank you, just put on my keyboard there. And they can very surgical kind of strikes they can do against other countries. This was not the case, let's say, like in World War II. This is actually a fairly modern thing, since maybe the first Gulf War, that we've seen them really be able to, in a discriminatory way, decide we're going to hit this building right here. And a lot of this has to do with GPS technology and all of that they can pinpoint something and hit it right where they want to, within probably a few feet or so of where they plan on it heading. So, and I think isn't this what did we talk about this, what the Israelis did with this nuclear scientist, with those drone? They just, well, that's also very discriminatory. Is that his license plate number? Yeah, that's it. All right, here we go. Yeah, I thought there was a drone thing. No, we used the drone thing on when we killed the other military leader in Iran, a year ago or so. That was a drone, and those, I mean, that's pretty accurate, because the guy was like in a car, and they can pinpoint the car, hit it, and I remember the first time I heard this word. This was back in the early '90s when the first Gulf War started. That they had bombed, a government building, and they were talking about. They had some intelligence on how many people had died in the building, and so many people, blah, 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 50 something. And then they said, and then the collateral damage was also the same amount, about 50 or so. And a reporter asked this general, what's collateral damage? What does that mean? And now maybe you know what it is, right? Collateral damage is the people who happen to be walking by at the time that building got exploded, the people who lived next door to the building that got bombed, that building caught on fire, or that building also, caught debris and killed people also. Innocent people that had nothing to do with it, probably. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And okay, that's probably no way to get around that. But if you think back, like during, not that you can think back to it, but you see video of World War II, and they're flying over in these big, huge squadrons of, B-19 bombers, just these huge airplanes, loud, and maybe dozens of them flying over. And of course, the town they're flying, let's say they're going to bomb, Hamburg or Berlin or something, and all they can, of course, the town of Berlin or Hamburg, they've gone through these drills like we had. Also in the U.S., we were prepared for that. They turn all the lights off, that the bombers can't see. So they're having to work off of a real navigator who's like manually figuring out the GPS coordinates where they are, basically. I don't think they use those terms. And then they say, okay, open the bomb bay doors, and because we're over the factory right now. Well, that wasn't very accurate. That was not targeted thing. They would just, all those bombers would just drop their bombs right there. And of course, they hit the factory, but they also hit a lot of other, and you can see pictures in Europe of countries after the war, England and Germany in particular, where, there's hardly a stone upon another. And these are neighborhoods, people where they lived. And people were killed. Of course, they had warning. They had, they could find, people got to go to an air raid shelter and all that. But a lot of people were killed. And so I'll say more about that in a minute. But that was not targeted. That's all they had back then. They could, the targeting a weapon was having somebody who knew how to figure out the coordinates and say, okay, we're there now. Let them fly. And but now, though, it's all very. I think sometimes the pilots probably even know. They just know to, okay, hit the button now, and wherever that missile's going, they may or may not know what their target is. That their mission is just to get it there. Okay, so the inflictors of the wrong. This is how we discriminate, not towards civilians that are caught up in these circumstances that they, we don't have any reason to believe that they're a part of it. So and part of this discussion that goes on into this idea of discrimination in the war is that bombing civilian residential areas, as I said, maybe strictly going after that for a while and not bombing military installations, in hopes that perhaps the people, will, once we bomb those places, the people will rise up maybe and try to overthrow their government in some way when they realize that it's affecting them that way. And we did some of this in Germany. We bombed cities that had no military value, but they had cultural value. They were important cities to Germans culturally, and we did it in order to break the will of the people who were kind of fanatically supporting Hitler, at least, or they appeared to be, and we bombed and bombed and bombed everything else, and they weren't changing, and so we started bombing cities. Do you guys still read Slaughterhouse 5, maybe? From Kurt Vonnegut. You know the story, or do you know the title? Yeah. Okay. Well, Kurt Vonnegut was a POW in World War II, and he was near Dresden, and that's kind of what the story is based around. And we bombed cities, those two cities, Dresden and Leipzig were two cities we bombed that didn't have any military value, but it was meant to break the will of the people. Just to, and it was effective, I mean, it did, although by the time, that the people were ready to end the war, but they didn't have the means, to really do any kind of political overthrow. But there's actually been quite, that would, if anyone's, I'm going to throw out these topics for senior thesis things, but that particular event, if you're interested in World War II history and want to tie it into something here with ethics or this class, just war theory, the places that we bombed there, and those decisions were made, and those were tough decisions that the president made, and some by Roosevelt and some by Truman, because some happened later in the war. Those were tough decisions because they knew that they were not accidentally bombing neighborhoods because trying to hit a factory, but they were intentionally bombing cities. And yeah, I remember when the Berlin Wall first came down and Germany was reunited, going to Dresden and the beautiful church that was there stood before the war. The communists never rebuilt it. It just was a rubble pile. It was a Lutheran church and a very, culturally important church. And they rebuilt it after Germany. They think they finished rebuilding it in 2005, 2007. So it took them 12 years or so to rebuild it. But they used a lot of the same stone that was laying there in rubble. That's what happens. That's what happens if you bomb indiscriminately. You're going to hit churches. You're going to hit places that aren't really going to help your cause any as far as military goes. Okay, so all right, bombing civilian areas that include no kind of military target, committing acts of terrorism, let's say, on or for reprisal, let's say, against civilians, that kind of thing. That would be obviously, against the way we should conduct ourselves. Um, um, and also, this is a debatable part of the just war theory, but I think it's pretty well agreed upon. At least it is through the UN and through the Geneva Conference and all that. That chemical and biological weapons are out of the question. We shouldn't be using those kinds of things. And those were used in World War I, and now it's even just more deadly. You know that we have a bomb that I don't know. It actually officially it's been like they said no to it back in the 70s, but I think that we actually did finally build. It's called the neutron bomb. I don't know why I'm getting off topic a little bit. Have you heard of the word neutron bomb? Okay, the neutron bomb does something that it kills everybody, but it leaves all the structures in place. Like it doesn't like blow up buildings and stuff. It just kills the people. Now I don't understand the physics of it, but yeah. So I guess I'm not trying to be funny about it, but you could use one of those and take out a whole city with it. And then, they just got to call in people to come haul out the bodies, and you still got a functioning city there. You still have all the utilities and the buildings and everything. Nothing got destroyed physically, other than the people. We said that's not a weapon that kind of follows this kind of thinking. So I'm not saying we didn't build it, because the truth is that we do have chemical and biological weapons. The U.S. does, although we're like other countries. We've signed on to the treaty that says no to it, but those countries also have them as well. I guess we have them because other countries have them, and we just don't. We've committed not to using them, but I don't know that we wouldn't use them if some other country did, maybe. But that would be a horrible, horrible way to die, I would imagine. But there's no good way to die, I guess, in a war. Okay. So I said discrimination earlier. Another principle that should be used is proportionality, and it kind of goes along with the whole thinking about how going into war, that the force that is used must be proportional to the wrong that's been endured by the defensive country now. So that kind of thinking of proportionality goes into the actual conducting of the war. So this was part of the idea of doing it. Now, as we're actually doing it and carrying it out, we're going to continue thinking about that. Also, taking into account, again, this disproportional number of collateral civilian deaths or collateral damage. There was going to be, you risk some political capital when you do that too, because it just appears that you're kind of indiscriminately and without proportionality going in and kind of belligerently killing civilians intentionally, and you begin to kind of lose this, if I can use the word, justness of the war that you maybe went into it with. So you don't want to. That's maybe more of a political idea than. But if you don't do that, of course, you're going to lose that kind of help. This one also is fairly new, not new, but I say it's not really part of the kind of set ideas of discrimination, proportionality, but that the amount of force should be at a minimum, like what it takes to get the job done, and then that there's not a need, to have this kind of excessive, huge army. Of course, you want to maybe overwhelm the people, the other force. You want to have more people and more weapons and all that, but you want the minimum amount it's going to take to get it done and get it done well. And that's something that we've implemented, and some people have criticized even that in the last wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, as we were criticized for this exact reason, that we tried to do it with too few people, and it could have been done quicker with more people. But in a lot of ways, they were following this idea of using the minimum amount of force. We handle a lot of problems with force on a very surgical level that doesn't make the news, we don't hear about. But these SEAL team groups, they're not just sitting around like drinking coffee right now. I mean, they're training, and when they're not training, they're doing things, and they're militarily doing things that for our own national security that we don't know about. But they do those things very quickly, and that's kind of the whole idea. How many people are on these SEAL teams? Yeah, but I mean, like on each individual group, surgical group that goes in, it's like really pretty. It's pretty amazing, really, what they're able to, how much chaos they can create, and how much in a short amount of time, and how much damage they can inflict. But that's a very, very small, and that's the whole idea, right? Is that that if you have a brigade of people go in, or a platoon of people go in, that's a lot harder to get them out. It's a lot harder to, you've got to have landing vehicles, and you're going to announce but if you have 6 people go in and do it, 10 people go in and do it, they can get in and out and pretty quickly and do what they need, whatever the mission is, and get out. So that would be another example of the use of minimum force, that although minimum force with 6 or 10 Navy SEALs may feel like a lot of force if you're the person on the other end. But, who's seen the movie Zero Dark 30? See the movie Zero Dark 30? All right, if you're interested in how they hunted down Osama bin Laden and then what's the last maybe, what do you think, half hour or so, 25 minutes? The whole movie kind of shifts to this other thing where it's about the Navy SEAL team that goes in and does that. If it's anything like that, and I'm sure it's been dramatized a bit, but these guys don't fear. They're not afraid of death or bullets, or I mean, I'm sure that they have a healthy respect for them, but man, they're all business. They're really. There's a funny scene. You've seen it, right? That funny scene where they're flying the helicopters in, and the guy's got his headphones in, the one Navy SEAL, and he's like, and they're going in to carry out this huge mission, and he's like, "What are you listening to?" And he's like, "Tony Robbins, man, this guy is amazing. Like, he's changed my life. When I get out of the Navy, I'm really gonna do something important with my life." I'm like, dude, this is it. This is the highlight right now. This is that's guys. I don't know, who knows if that's real or not, but all right. Minimum force, okay, without any. Yeah, okay, good. Let's see. Okay, non-combatants and wounded soldiers, prisoners of war, must be respected and treated humanely. And this is something that I can say with some degree of certainty that the United States has, at least especially, I don't know how it was handled in the Civil War, maybe we were worse to our own people, but when it comes to foreign prisoners of war, we actually do a pretty good job of this. And in a way, it works to our advantage. You'd think, oh, be harsh on them, don't feed them, do this to get all the information you can. Actually, if word gets around that being taken prisoner by the United States of America is a better life than the one you're living in this foxhole or this trench or whatever, people are more willing to stop fighting and I'll just be taken prisoner. And in many cases, I know they're fed better, they're treated better, they've got a bed, and they've got and they're just kind of stuck there like they're in jail. So that's one thing that our country, I think, traditionally has done well. I'm not saying there haven't been abuses about that, but that we treat our foreign prisoners really well. Do you know that Oklahoma had a lot of, it's a perfect place for POW camps here in Oklahoma. We had a number of POW camps here in Oklahoma during World War II. The closest was in Pryor, Oklahoma. And Pryor, and there was one in Muskogee too, or outside Muskogee, but Pryor, between Choteau and Pryor, there was and the one in Pryor was for naval officers, mainly submarine officers on submarines. And I don't know how we take those people prisoner. I guess they give up, but they were treated well, and they even some of them had jobs like in town, and they would leave the POW camp and go to a job in town, and they would come back in the afternoon, like they didn't try to escape, they just, And for a while, now it's ended, they're all too old, but for a long time, these German POWs would, every 5 years or so, would come back to Pryor. I'm sure it happened like to, and so would the guards who probably weren't from Oklahoma, but worked at the camp, and they would have like reunions and stuff with them. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? Like, I never heard of an American POW going back to a German POW camp for a reunion with the Nazi guards. I probably didn't happen that way. But they were, and there was never an escape and never an attempt of an escape. And in fact, they were kind of all treated like trustees. But you have to know that probably these naval officers who could do some navigation by the stars, if they look outside at night for a few nights, they figure out, oh man, we're in Oklahoma. They haven't told us where we are, but I can figure it out. And we got a couple choices. We can just kind of live with this. If they wanted to escape, what are they going to do? Are they going to run to the Gulf of Mexico? And then what? Start swimming? Hope a German U-boat pulls up and they can swim out. I mean, you're stuck. This is not like, it's not like a prisoner of war camp in Maine or something, or on one of the coasts. This is, you're a long way from anywhere. Mexico is a long way away. So yeah, I don't know. It's but that's the idea then. So that we treat prisoners, of course, wounded soldiers get treated, surgically get treated, and if they need that, or medically get treated. Another one is that that blind obedience to immoral orders that are given is not an excuse for carrying those orders out. Now it's probably going to take you a lot of time to figure this all out if you're a soldier, but if you're a soldier, if you feel like the order that's been given to you is immoral, then, and you refuse to carry that order out, then, or you do carry it out because you're following orders. That's not an excuse. You can't later say, yes, I killed that family because my commander told me to. I was following orders. This was a common thing the Nazis said during the Nuremberg trials was, well, I was just following orders, I turned on the gas, I was just following orders, I did this, I did that, but I did it because my commanding officer told me to do it. And during those trials, and the Nuremberg trials were the kind of the show trial. I mean, that's where the bigger names were tried, but there were trials all over Germany of people who were suspected, deeply involved Nazis that are lesser known trials. But they also, some people were executed because of those trials and out of those trials. But that was the common excuse. And because of that, that's been now, okay, look, you knew this was wrong. Like you had to know, like morally, you had to know it's wrong to, kill all these women and children in a gas chamber. There's no question about it. But you carried it out. So saying that you're just following orders is not good enough. And then the other one that goes along with this is that of committing a genocide, of course, during a war, which ties in with what I was just talking about loosely, but just an extermination of an entire nation or ethnic group. That, of course, would be against the way in which we should carry out a war. That we're, and of course, any order to carry out a genocide would can be considered an immoral order that can be rejected. And you can say, I'm not going to follow that order. Now, I don't know what happens to you in the military whenever you say that. Maybe some way to verbalize it where your commander knows that you're kind of availing yourself of law, but you maybe have to go to jail for a while before your case kind of gets, because you don't disobey any commands. Okay. Just a couple of quotes here from the Catechism, and they're, 2312, so they're right next to each other, 2312, 2314. The Church and human reason both assert the government validity of the moral law during armed conflict. The mere fact that war has regrettably broken out does not mean that everything becomes licit between the warring parties. It doesn't mean that everything's allowed. Like people say everything's fair in love and war. Well, this is saying no, it's not. It doesn't mean everything becomes fair during that time. Then 2314 says, every act of war directed to the indiscriminate destruction of whole cities or vast areas where there are inhabitants is a crime against God and man, which merits firm and unequivocal condemnation, A danger of modern warfare is that it provides the opportunity to those who possess modern scientific weapons, especially atomic, biological, chemical weapons, to commit such crimes. But I would say, not adding to the catechism, but modern warfare also actually allows us to be more discriminate than we were before. And like I was saying, really pinpoint things where we want certain weapons to go. But the opposite's also true. A part of modern warfare is we're able to wipe out entire nations or cities or whatever in a fairly easy and fast manner. What time is it? Say again? Okay. So I'll finish this Monday. Let me get back to some of these things that I have here. If you guys just come up here when I call your name. Laura never came in, did she? Murphy's not here either. Eli, Shay, Aiden. Grant, Pete, Patrick, Natalie, Luke, Avery. Avery, Sarah, John, Brock, Lauren, not here, because those are the people who are not here. All right. And those grades have been up there for a while, I think, for most of you. It's just all right. We're gonna quiz Natalie. I have to come up here a few times. Sorry, Natalie, Eli, John, Aiden, Ty. Yes. There's an old quiz there. Sarah, Patrick, Avery. Luke, Brock, Shay, and Grant. Keith. Yeah, I think there's one back on that table back behind Shay there. I think I have maybe one more thing. Let me see. Yes, I do. All right, one more. Luke, Patrick, Eli, Shay. Last one, guys. Last one today. Sarah, Avery. What's that? Someone talk to me? Oh, there you go. Grant, Natalie, Pete, Natalie, there she is. All right.
Hopefully it's more of a draw, it's just like so much. Yeah. My financial was